Hey everyone, my name is Marco Brown. I'm a divorce attorney at Brown Family Law here in Salt Lake City, Utah. And we're taping a couple of these, so I'm going to look down here and then I'll also look up there. So just keep that in mind. We today are going to talk about the top 10 tips for DIY divorces. So you've decided that you're going to get divorced, you don't want to hire an attorney. And these are the top 10 tips for people like you that are just going to do your divorce on your own. So let's get right into these. We got 10 of them. So tip number one is be nice. It sounds odd coming from a divorce attorney. I realize that. But this is my number one rule, even when people hire us at Brown Family Law and we're representing them in their divorce or their family law case is, just be nice. There's absolutely no reason to be a jerk during your divorce. Being a jerk really just means that it's going to be harder for you to get done with your case, and it's going to be more difficult to figure out exactly what you're doing with custody and parent time with your kids, and then also to negotiate money, because people fight about two things in divorce. They fight about kids and money, and if you're a jerk, it's going to be way harder to get things done when it comes to your kids and your money. So be nice about things. Now, that doesn't mean you have to roll over. Absolutely not. You can fight, but you do not have to call the other person names. You don't have to, go on social media and be a jerk. You don't have to do any of that stuff. You can fight for yourself while being nice at the same time. So be nice. And especially, I'm going to get to tip number two here, but if you're just sitting down with each other and talking to each other and trying to work things out and you're being a jerk, that's not going to happen if you're DIY in this thing, okay? You're a jerk, your spouse is going to hate you, and it's much more likely to go to an attorney at that point. So tip number one, be nice. Tip number two, talk through and agree on every issue, okay? This means you talk through custody, you talk through child support, you talk through what you're going to do with the cars, you talk through what you're going to do with the marital home, you talk through what you're going to do with asset division, you talk through what you're going to do with debt division. You're going to talk through all of these things. You're going to talk through what you're going to do with the plates, okay? The stuff in your house. You're going to talk through all of these issues, and you're going to sit down with each other and you're going to have an adult conversation. You're going to talk through all these issues, and then you're going to come to an agreement. Because if you don't come to an agreement and you're DIYing this, you're doing it yourself, then you're going to have to try to go through litigation DIYing it, and that is not what you want to do. Let me tell you, going through litigation as doing your divorce on your own, going through litigation is a bad place for you to be. You do not want to do that. So sit down, talk through all of the issues, and what happens when people come in and talk with me, they'll often say, hey, look, we have an agreement on everything. And I say, okay, what is everything? And then they start talking through things. They only have an agreement on three things, okay? They don't even have an agreement on parent time with the kids, okay? They talked about what to do with the car and what to do with the cat, but they haven't talked about what to do with the kids. So sit down, talk about every single issue. All right, that's tip number two. Now, tip number three, write down your agreement on every issue, and then both of you sign that agreement. Okay, so you have this conversation, you've talked about everything, you've agreed on everything, and then when you do this, you write it down, okay? You write the thing down, then you both look at it, and you both say to each other, yes, that's what we agreed to, and then you sign it. Now, you don't do this because that becomes a contract that's enforceable, because it's really not. The reason you do this is because it puts you on the same page, because you're going to have to take that agreement and then turn that into legal paperwork a little bit later on. And if you get to the legal paperwork part and your spouse says, no, that's not what we agreed to, you can go back to this agreement that you both looked at and wrote down and signed. You say, yeah, it is actually. It's consistent with that, all right? So that's the reason you want to do it. Not because it's a contract that's enforceable in court, but because if you're doing your divorce yourself, you need to have something to go back to if your spouse says, no, that's not what we agreed to when we sat down. So write it down, and then both of you sign it. Not just one of you, both of you sign it. That's tip number three. Tip number four, use the Utah OCAP system. So if you're in Utah, and that's where I'm talking to people from, I'm a divorce attorney in Utah, not in Pennsylvania, not in Florida, can't give you advice there at all. So when you're in Utah and you are doing your divorce yourself, you want to use what's called the OCAP system. That's the Online Court Assistance Program, okay? So you go online, you Google OCAP divorce, it'll get you into the system, you pay $35, it'll generate the documents that you need, and it also give you a step-by-step, this is how you do it, sort of checklist. So go in and use that system. Now, I gotta tell you that system is not great. It's okay, and it's especially okay if you don't have that much, right? If you've been married for a couple years and you have a Honda Civic and a cat, like it's fantastic. But if you have a more complicated situation, you have kids, you have retirement, you have a house, you have these things, it's not the greatest, and we'll talk through that just a little bit in one of the other tips, but you definitely want to sit down, and if you're doing it yourself, and you've decided that that's how this is going to go, then you want to use that Utah OCAP system, okay? You can go find other paperwork systems online. None of those are any good. They're not state specific. They'll tell you they're state specific, but they're not really. They're just junk. So go use the Utah OCAP system. All right, that's tip number 4. Let's move on to tip number 5, which is both of you read over the final documents before those documents are filed, okay? Now this cuts out monkey business. What I mean by this is, I can't tell you, I've met with over 10,000 people doing divorce and custody cases here in Utah. I cannot tell you how many times I have sat down with somebody and heard this story. Well, we talked through everything, we agreed on everything, she or he wrote it up, and then I didn't do anything after that. I didn't even get a copy of the divorce decree when the judge signed it. And then 6 months later, I went and I got a copy, and it's totally different than what we agreed to, okay? I've heard that story hundreds of times, hundreds, okay? So don't do that. Don't make that mistake. Read over the documents that you are going to file, the documents that are generated from the OCAP system, okay? You want to read those over, and then you want to make sure that they comport with the agreement that you sat down and agreed to and that you wrote down and you both signed. Again, that's why you want to have that, okay? That in writing that you both signed. But make sure that they are consonant, that they're the same things, okay? And when you do this, you are going to cut out the monkey business. So do not let your soon-to-be ex be the one that does 100% of this and you never check it, okay? You are divorcing this person, and you may, for some reason, still trust them, but you shouldn't at this point, okay? This stuff happens. Again, I've heard this story 100 times. Don't allow that to happen. Check it out check out the final documents before you ever file those final documents with the court. That's tip number 5. Tip number 6, both spouses go to the court and file the final documents together. This is, the extension of tip number 5, which again is, read over the final documents before you file them. You want both spouses to go down to the courthouse to file those documents with the clerk of court because, again, no monkey business. If you do this, there is essentially no way that there can be any monkey business with your divorce at all. And what you agreed to in the beginning is going to be what is on the finalized documents that gets filed with the court and that gets signed by the judge. So both of you go down there and do this. I know this is like super awkward. I get that. Almost no one does this. I don't want to take the time, but 100% your documents are going to say what you want them to say if you follow rule number 5 and rule number 6. Okay, tip number 7. When your divorce decree is signed, get a copy and compare it to the agreement that you signed when you sat down and you talked through everything at the beginning. Okay, this is, again, you just want to make absolutely certain that what is signed by the judge is what you agreed to in the beginning. Again, I've seen this happen so often that people simply don't do this, and it's 6 months later, a year later, 2 years later, they finally get a copy from the court and they look at it and it's totally different. So custody is different with the kids, right? And child support is completely different. There's alimony they never knew about. There's all this debt division, like they get saddled with the debt. Okay, $50,000, $75,000, I've seen it all. So again, you don't want this to happen. So get a copy immediately of the signed documents when the court signs them, the judge signs them, and then read it over. Make sure that it's exactly what you agreed to in the beginning and that it's what was on the paperwork that you finalized and gave to the court. Because even after you give stuff to the court, your ex could come in and give other stuff to the court and say, well, we amended it, right? We changed some things around. So really it's not this stuff we gave you, but it's this other thing. This can happen. And I've heard this story so many times. So don't do that. Don't allow that to happen. Get a copy of it, read it over. And you need to do it very quickly because you have about a 60-day window, okay? After it's signed by the court, if there's something incorrect, then it can be changed, but there's really a 60-day window in which to change it. So you need to get a copy immediately and look it over, certainly within those 60 days. Okay, that's tip number 7. Tip number 8, read your divorce decree every month for the first year after you're divorced. This is not to ensure that it's correct. I'm going to assume that your divorce decree is correct at this point. This is really to familiarize yourself with your divorce decree. Again, I've met with over 10,000 people, and thousands of those people literally have no idea what is in their divorce decree because they have never read it. I have guys usually do this. For whatever reason, it's mostly guys. They simply don't ever look at it again. Maybe it's just traumatic and they don't want to do that. I don't know, but they just don't read it. And so, it's 4 years later and they're meeting with me because their spouse or their ex has decided they're not going to let them see the kids anymore. And they bring in, and I ask them, do you have your divorce decree? They're like, no, I've never actually read the thing. So I have to go get it online and read it with them together. And it would have saved them so many problems over the last 4 years if they had simply sat down and actually read their divorce decree. So get it, read it once a month, familiarize yourself with it for at least the first year after your divorce. That's tip number 8. Tip number 9 is to be flexible. So if you're DIYing your divorce, you're doing it yourself, you're probably going to mess some things up, okay? There are probably going to be things that you didn't think of when you were negotiating your divorce initially, especially with kids. So, you're going to get done with the process and you're going to be like, oh yeah, we didn't think of that, we didn't do that. So you need to be flexible, okay? You need to allow some flexibility to your ex, and in turn, you want your ex to give you some flexibility because again, you probably messed a few things up. You probably left some stuff out that should have been in there. Whatever the case may be, you want flexibility. And the only way to get flexibility from your ex is to give flexibility. So be flexible as much as you can when it comes to your divorce if you're DIYing it. Okay, that's number 9. And then tip number 10, seriously consider hiring an attorney. I alluded to this previously. If, the OCAP system in Utah, the Online Court Assistance Program, it is good for you young people who get divorced and, have a Honda Civic and a dog or a cat or whatever it is, right? But when you have kids, people fight about kids. They fight a lot about kids because they're incredibly important. When they have retirement, when you have a house that's, real estate's blown up in Utah. So tons and tons of our clients here have $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 in equity in a house, okay? You mess up that one issue in your divorce because you decided to DIY it to save some cash, that's a $600,000 problem you have, and that's just on the house. Then if you have retirement, there are hundreds of thousands of dollars there. Let's say you're 10% off, you're talking about tens of thousands of dollars, right? You mess up with your kids, you mess up parent time with your kids, you're never, ever going to forgive yourself. Custody of your children, you're never going to forgive yourself if you do that sort of stuff. So if you have more complicated cases involving kids, involving money, involving debt, assets, alimony, no one knows how to calculate alimony. Half the divorce attorneys in Utah that I work with don't know how to calculate alimony correctly, okay? You think you're going to do it correctly? Yeah, probably not, okay? Child support, all these things becomes exponentially more complicated. And when it becomes complicated, you want to do it right, okay? So seriously, seriously consider hiring an attorney. I'm not telling you have to do it. If you want to DIY it, that's great. Utah is the land of the DIY. Like, we all want to save money. We all want to do this stuff. That's cool if you've made that determination. But if you got a complicated situation with kids and assets, really, really consider hiring a divorce attorney to help you through this. Our average case cost here at Brown Family Law is about $8,000. But look, $8,000 to figure out your divorce, to figure out what's going to happen with your kids for the next 10 to 20 years, what's going to happen with all your assets, make sure that you maximize the time with your kids and you maximize your assets and the money you're getting from your divorce. It's a pittance. It's an absolute pittance, okay? Of course you're going to come and you're going to pay that. If you really see the value in it and you realize like just how important getting this is done correctly, okay? You're going to come pay $8,000, $10,000 to get it done. That's why we're here. But if you want to DIY it, cool. You really do need to determine and consider whether or not you should hire a divorce attorney. Okay, so those are the tips for the people going through DIY divorces. We go live. Okay, I appreciate everybody being here. If you need help with your divorce here in Utah, we're here for you. I've helped about 4,000 people through the process, met with over 10,000 people. This is all we do. I couldn't do a DUI or a real estate case if I tried, because this is the one thing we do, because we're going to do it better than everybody else here in Utah. So you need help with that, give us a call, 801-685-9999. Ask for Marco Brown. Until next time, we'll see ya. Thank you so much.